What happens when a comedy legend sits down for what should be a light chat and instead finds himself under attack by a host who refuses to let him speak? It only took one dismissive comment for the entire interview to unravel into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Rowan Atkinson arrived at the Loose Women's studio that afternoon expecting a friendly conversation. He had spent decades making millions of people laugh around the world, creating characters that became part of popular culture. But what started as a routine promotional appearance quickly spiraled into something nobody could have predicted. The panel that day included Denise Welch, who was leading the interview, along with Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Janet Street Porter. The atmosphere started off pleasant enough. Rowan sat across from the four women, smiling politely as the cameras rolled. Denise opened the conversation. She leaned forward with a big smile and said, "So Rowan, we are absolutely thrilled to have you here today. You have been making people laugh for so many years. Tell us, what brings you to our show?" Rowan began to answer. "Well, thank you for having me. I've been working on a new project that I am very excited about, and I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to talk about it and connect with the audience." Before he could finish his thought, Denise interrupted. Right. But before we get into all that, I have to ask you something that has been on my mind. You have played these silly characters your whole career, these bumbling fools. Do you ever wonder if people take you seriously as an actor?" The studio went quiet for a moment. Rowan looked surprised but maintained his composure. He cleared his throat and replied carefully, "I think the characters I have created have resonated with people because they find something genuine in them. Comedy is a serious craft, and I have always approached it with dedication." Denise laughed, but it was not a warm laugh. "A serious craft? Come on now, you pull funny faces for a living. My kids could do that." Nadia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Kay looked down at her notes. Janet raised her eyebrows. The energy in the room had changed completely. Rowan took a breath, trying to keep things professional. Physical comedy requires timing, precision, and years of practice. It is not as simple as it might appear. Denise waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. You act like you are doing Shakespeare. You are just a funny face, man. Let us be honest here." Nadia jumped in quickly, trying to redirect. "Rowan, I think what is so brilliant about your work is how universal it is. People from all over the world can enjoy it without even needing dialogue. That is actually really special." Rowan smiled at her gratefully. "Thank you, Nadia. That has always been the goal, to create something that transcends language and culture." But Denise was not done. She leaned forward again, her tone becoming sharper. "You know what I find interesting? You have been doing the same thing for decades. The same silly walks, the same rubber face. Do you not think it is time to grow up a bit?" The audience gasped. Even the other panelists looked shocked. Kay spoke up this time. "Denise, I do not think that is fair. Rowan has had an incredible career spanning many different types of performances." Denise turned to Kay with an annoyed expression. "I am just asking the questions our viewers want answered. Nobody else seems willing to be honest with him." Rowan straightened in his chair. His voice remained calm, but there was a new firmness to it. "I appreciate honesty, but I do not appreciate disrespect. I came here in good faith to have a conversation, not to be insulted." Denise rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go. The famous actor cannot handle a bit of straight talk. This is exactly what I am talking about. You live in this bubble where everyone tells you how wonderful you are." Janet finally spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "Denise, this is getting ridiculous. He is our guest." Rowan held up his hand gently toward Janet, signaling he could handle it himself. He looked directly at Denise. "I have been performing for over 40 years. I have faced critics, harsh reviews, and difficult audiences, but I have always maintained respect for others and expected the same in return. What you are doing right now is not honest journalism or even good television. It is simply rude." The other panelists nodded. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Denise laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "Rude? I am being real. Maybe you are just too sensitive. Maybe that is the problem with celebrities these days. You cannot handle anyone questioning you." Rowan shook his head slowly. "There is a difference between questioning someone and belittling them. You have done nothing but mock my career since I sat down. You have dismissed decades of work with flippant comments. You have interrupted me repeatedly, and now you are suggesting that I am too sensitive for pointing out your behavior." Nadia reached over and touched Rowan's arm supportively. You are absolutely right. I am sorry this has happened. Kay nodded in agreement. This was supposed to be a celebration of your work, not an attack. Denise threw her hands up. Unbelievable. I'm trying to have a real conversation here and everyone is ganging up on me. Fine. If you all want to sit here and worship at his feet, go ahead. Rowan remained composed. His voice was steady. Nobody is asking for worship. I'm asking for basic respect. The same respect I've shown you and everyone else here today, a woman in the audience called out. We love you, Rowan. Several others applauded in agreement. The show of support seemed to make Denise even more defensive. Denise snapped back. Oh, wonderful. Now the audience is getting involved. This is exactly what I am talking about. Nobody wants to have a real conversation anymore. Everyone just wants to tell famous people how great they are. Rowan looked at her with genuine confusion. What would satisfy you? What do you actually want from this conversation? Because it seems like you have already decided what you think about me, regardless of anything I might say. Denise threw up her hands again. I want honesty. I want you to admit that maybe, just maybe, you have been coasting on the same shtick for years. That maybe you are not this untouchable genius everyone pretends you are. The studio went completely silent. Even the crew members stopped what they were doing to watch. This had crossed from uncomfortable into genuinely shocking territory. Nadia put her face in her hands. Kay looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Janet stared at Denise with open disbelief. Rowan took a slow, deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I have never claimed to be untouchable or a genius. I am simply a performer who has dedicated his life to his craft. I have worked hard. I have studied comedy. I have tried to bring entertainment to people. If that is coasting to you, then we have very different definitions of the word. He continued, and I have to ask, what is this really about? Because this level of hostility seems personal. Have I done something to offend you specifically? If so, I am not aware of it, and I would appreciate you telling me directly instead of attacking me on air. Denise seemed taken aback by the direct question. She stammered slightly. It is not personal. I just think someone needs to ask these questions. Everyone is always so nice to celebrities. Someone has to be willing to challenge them. Kay could not stay quiet anymore. Her voice was sharp. Challenging someone and being needlessly cruel are two different things, Denise. You have not asked a single substantive question. You have just made personal attacks dressed up as honesty. Nadia lifted her head from her hands. She looked directly at Denise. I have to agree with Kay. This is not what we do. This is not who we are. Rowan came here in good faith, and you have treated him terribly from the moment he sat down. I am embarrassed right now. Janet added her voice to the chorus. You keep saying you want honesty. Well, here is some honesty. You are being a bully. That is what this is. You are bullying our guest on live television and trying to justify it as journalism or entertainment. It is neither. It is just mean. The audience erupted in applause. The support for Rowan and the condemnation of Denise's behavior was overwhelming. People in the seats were nodding vigorously in agreement. Denise looked around at her fellow panelists, at the audience, at the crew. She was completely isolated, but instead of backing down, she doubled down one more time. Fine. If everyone wants to coddle him, go ahead, but do not pretend like I am the villain here for asking tough questions. Rowan shook his head slowly. The sadness in his expression was evident. You keep calling them tough questions, but they are not questions at all. They are statements. Negative statements about me and my work. There is nothing tough about being rude. Any child can do that. Denise leaned back in her chair with her arms crossed. You know what? If you do not like the questions, maybe you should not come on talk shows. This is what we do. We ask tough questions. Janet interjected sharply. These are not tough questions, Denise. These are insulting comments disguised as questions. There is a difference. The tension in the studio was unbearable. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. The audience sat frozen, watching this car crash unfold in real time. Rowan stood up slowly. He removed his microphone with careful, deliberate movements. I think it is best if I leave now. Thank you to Nadia, Kay, and Janet for your kindness. I wish you all the best, Denise scoffed. Oh, so you are just going to walk out? How professional. Rowan paused and turned back to face her. His expression was not angry, just sad and disappointed. Walking away from disrespect is one of the most professional things a person can do. I have spent my entire life treating people with dignity. I will not stay somewhere where that is not reciprocated. The other three panelists looked mortified. Nadia had tears in her eyes. Kay shook her head in disbelief. Janet stared at Denise with barely concealed anger. Denise seemed to realize, finally, that she had gone too far. Her face flushed. "Wait, Rowan, I did not mean to." But Rowan had already turned away. He walked off the set with his head held high, leaving behind a stunned studio. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the awkward silence that followed. Kay finally broke the silence. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "Well, that was completely unnecessary. Rowan Atkinson is a legend in the entertainment industry. He did not deserve any of that." Nadia wiped her eyes. "I cannot believe what just happened. We invited him here as a guest, and he was treated horribly. I feel terrible." Janet did not hold back. She turned to Denise directly. "That was completely out of line. You crossed every line there is. What were you thinking?" Denise tried to defend herself, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "I was just trying to push the conversation somewhere interesting. I did not think he would be so sensitive about it." Kay shook her head firmly. "No, you were not pushing anything interesting. You were being deliberately provocative and disrespectful. There is no excuse for it." The audience began to murmur. Some people were shaking their heads in disapproval. Others were whispering to each other. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Nadia addressed the audience directly. "I want to apologize on behalf of all of us. Rowan came here today in good faith, and he was not treated the way a guest should be treated. That is not what this show is supposed to be about." The audience applauded Nadia's words. It was clear where their sympathies lay. Denise shifted in her seat uncomfortably. She tried one more time to justify herself. "I really was just trying to have an honest conversation. Maybe I came across too strong, but..." Janet cut her off. "There is no but. You were rude. End of story. I think we all need to learn from this." The producers finally signaled to cut to commercial. As the camera stopped rolling, the mood on set remained tense. The other panelists barely looked at Denise. The crew members were whispering among themselves. Backstage, Rowan was already gathering his things. A producer approached him nervously. "Rowan, we are so sorry about what happened. Is there anything we can do?" Rowan gave a small, sad smile. "No, thank you. I appreciate your concern, but I think it is best if I just head out. Please give my regards to the crew." They were all very professional. The producer nodded, looking embarrassed. "We really are sorry. That should never have happened." Back on set, when the cameras came back on, the atmosphere was completely different. Denise looked subdued. The other panelists looked uncomfortable. They tried to continue with the rest of the show, but the earlier incident hung over everything. Kay attempted to move forward. "Well, that was certainly an unexpected turn of events. I think we can all agree that things got out of hand," Nadia added softly. "I just hope Rowan knows that most of us have tremendous respect for him and his work. He did not deserve what happened today." The audience applauded again, making their position crystal clear. Denise finally spoke up, her voice much quieter than before. "Look, if I upset anyone, that was not my intention. I was trying to have a real conversation." Janet raised an eyebrow. "If you upset anyone?" "Denise, you absolutely did upset someone. You upset our guest so much that he left. There is no if about it." The tension continued. Denise seemed to shrink in her chair. The confidence and swagger she had displayed earlier were completely gone. As the show moved on to other segments, the panelists tried their best to act normal, but every viewer could sense that something had fundamentally shifted. The easy camaraderie that usually characterized the show was replaced by strained politeness. During another commercial break, Janet turned to Denise. "I hope you realize how badly you messed up today. That man has brought joy to millions of people. He did not come here to be attacked." Denise looked down at her hands. "I know. I do not know what came over me. I thought I was being provocative and interesting, but I can see now that I just came across as mean." Kay sighed. "Mean is putting it mildly. You were cruel. And for what? There was no reason for any of that." Nadia added, "The worst part is that he handled it with such grace. Even when you were attacking him, he remained dignified. That says everything about his character, and unfortunately, quite a bit about the situation today." When the show finally ended, the audience filed out quietly. Usually there was excited chatter after a taping, but today people seemed shocked and uncomfortable. They had witnessed something they never expected to see. The crew began breaking down the set in silence. The usual lighthearted banter was absent. Everyone knew they had just witnessed one of the most uncomfortable moments in the show's history. One crew member muttered to another, "I cannot believe she went after him like that. He is Rowan Atkinson, for crying out loud. Who does that?" Another crew member shook his head. "I felt so bad for him. He looked genuinely hurt, and the way he handled it, just quietly leaving instead of making a scene. Pure class." Meanwhile, Denise sat in the green room by herself. The reality of what had happened was finally sinking in. She had come into work that morning thinking she would conduct a memorable interview. She had succeeded, but not in the way she intended. The other panelists gathered their things and left without saying much to Denise. The cold shoulder was deliberate and clear. They were not going to pretend that what happened was acceptable. As Janet packed up her notes, she paused at the door and looked back at Denise. "You know, we all have moments where we push too hard or say the wrong thing, but what happened today was not just a moment. It was sustained and deliberate. I hope you think about that." Denise nodded but said nothing. What could she say? Everything Janet said was true. Nadia stopped by briefly. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Rowan has made people happy for decades. He is universally loved because he is talented and kind. Today you tried to tear him down for no reason. That is not who we are supposed to be as hosts. We are supposed to lift people up, not knock them down." After everyone left, Denise sat alone in the silent green room. The excitement and energy of the morning had evaporated completely. In its place was a growing sense of regret and embarrassment. She replayed the interview in her mind. Each cutting comment, each dismissive laugh, each interruption. Seen in retrospect, without the adrenaline of the live moment, her behavior looked even worse than she feared. A production assistant knocked softly on the door. "Denise? The producers would like to speak with you." Denise stood up slowly and followed the assistant down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last. She knew this conversation was not going to be pleasant. In the producer's office, the atmosphere was cold and professional. The executive producer sat behind her desk with a serious expression. Another producer stood by the window, arms crossed. The executive producer spoke first. "Denise, we need to talk about what happened today. That was completely unacceptable. Rowan Atkinson is an internationally respected performer. We invited him as our guest, and he was subjected to what can only be described as an attack." Denise started to respond, but the producer held up a hand. "I am not finished. We have already received dozens of complaints from audience members who were there today. Our social media is blowing up with criticism. This is a public relations nightmare." The other producer chimed in. "What were you thinking? This is not the type of show we run. We have respectful conversations with our guests. What you did today was hostile and unprofessional." Denise finally spoke, her voice small. "I thought I was creating good television. I thought people would appreciate the honesty." The executive producer leaned forward. "Honesty? Denise, there is a difference between asking tough questions and being rude. You crossed that line repeatedly, and when your fellow panelists tried to intervene, you doubled down. That shows a serious lack of judgment." Denise felt tears prickling at her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of humiliation and anger at herself. She had messed up badly and she knew it. The producer by the window spoke more gently. "Look, we all make mistakes, but this was a big one. You need to understand the gravity of what happened. Rowan Atkinson walked off our set. That does not happen. Guests do not walk off unless something has gone terribly wrong," the executive producer continued. "We are going to have to figure out how to handle this. The episode obviously cannot air as is. We will need to issue some kind of statement, and you will need to think very carefully about your role going forward." Denise nodded slowly. The weight of the situation was finally hitting her fully. What had started as an attempt to be edgy and provocative had backfired spectacularly. She left the office feeling shell-shocked. As she walked through the empty corridors of the studio, she passed promotional posters for the show, smiling faces of the panelists, promises of fun and friendly conversation. Today had been anything but. Outside, the late afternoon sun was still bright. People were going about their normal days, completely unaware of the disaster that had just unfolded inside that studio. Denise got into her car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. She thought about Rowan's face when he stood up to leave, the disappointment in his eyes, the dignity with which he handled the situation. He had been the bigger person in every possible way. Meanwhile, she had let her ego and desire for attention override her professionalism. The drive home was long and lonely. Her phone kept buzzing with messages, but she could not bring herself to look at them. She knew they would not be supportive. How could they be? Back at the studio, Kay, Nadia, and Janet sat together in the parking lot, talking about what had happened. They were all still processing the shocking turn of events. Kay spoke first. "I have been doing this show for years, and I've never seen anything like that. How do you treat a guest that way? Especially someone like Rowan Atkinson." Nadia wiped her eyes again. "I just keep thinking about how he tried so hard to stay calm and professional. Even when she kept attacking him, he never lost his temper. He just quietly stood up for himself and left." Janet shook her head. "The man has brought joy to countless people around the world. He is beloved for good reason, and she tried to make him look foolish on our show. It was painful to watch." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Kay finally sighed. "I hope this does not damage the show permanently. We have worked so hard to build something special here. Today felt like watching it all fall apart." Nadia nodded. "I am worried about that too. People are not going to forget this. How could they? We watched a legend get disrespected in real time." Janet looked at both of them. "All we can do is be better. Make sure our future guests are treated with the respect they deserve, and hope that people remember we tried to stop it. We did speak up." They all agreed on that point at least. They had tried to defend Rowan. They had called out the inappropriate behavior, but it had not been enough to prevent the inevitable conclusion. As they finally parted ways and drove home, each of them replayed the afternoon's events. The bright promise of the morning, the excitement of having such a distinguished guest, and then the slow-motion car crash of watching it all go wrong. The incident would become one of those moments that people reference when talking about interviews gone wrong. A cautionary tale about the importance of treating guests with respect, no matter how confident a host might feel in their approach. For Rowan, the day had been frustrating and disappointing. He had come to promote his work and share his experiences. Instead, he had been forced to defend his entire career against baseless attacks. But he had handled it the only way he knew how, with dignity and grace. As he arrived home that evening, he took a moment to reflect. The interview had been unpleasant, certainly, but it had also reminded him of something important. After decades in the public eye, he had learned that the best response to disrespect is not anger or retaliation. It is simply to walk away and maintain your dignity. He thought about all the people who had supported him over the years, the fans who loved his work, the colleagues who respected his craft, the friends who valued his kindness. Those relationships were built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. They mattered far more than one hostile interview. In the end, the incident at Loose Women became a defining moment, but not in the way Denise had hoped. It was not remembered as bold or provocative television. It was remembered as a masterclass in how not to treat a guest and how grace under pressure truly looks. Rowan Atkinson had walked into that studio as a legend, and despite someone's best efforts to diminish him, he walked out as one too. His reputation remained intact, enhanced even by the way he handled an impossible situation. He had shown that true professionalism means knowing when to stand up for yourself and when to simply walk away. The dramatic confrontation served as a reminder to everyone in the entertainment industry about the importance of respect, preparation, and understanding your role as a host. When you invite someone onto your show, they are your guest, and guests deserve to be treated with courtesy, regardless of how badly you might want to create a viral moment. The other panelists would talk about this day for years to come. They would reference it as the day they learned how quickly things can go wrong when ego overtakes professionalism. They would use it as a teaching moment, a reminder to always treat guests with the respect they deserve. For the crew members who witnessed it all, the incident became legendary. They would tell new staff members about the time a legendary performer was pushed so far that he had no choice but to walk away. About how he did so with such grace that even in leaving, he taught everyone watching a lesson about dignity. The audience members who were there that day would never forget it. They came expecting a fun afternoon watching a talk show taping. Instead, they witnessed a masterclass in maintaining composure under pressure. They saw how a true professional handles disrespect without stooping to the level of the person disrespecting them. What happens when a comedy legend sits down for what should be a light chat and instead finds himself under attack? It only took one dismissive comment for everything to unravel. But it took decades of professionalism, talent, and grace for Rowan Atkinson to handle that unraveling with the dignity that has defined his entire career.